So good morning again and happy Valentine's Day to one and all. And I would like to start us off today with a little video clip about a Valentine's Day movie. And I thought we would enjoy some levity together.
Valentine's Day. It comes every year whether you like it or not.
Everybody's gonna love today, gonna love today, gonna love today.
It's the day when your love life is put on display.
I'd like to send a dozen of those to the best girl at my school.
These for your wife?
I'm 10 years old.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Where there's always a chance for romance or disaster.
Okay, I'm gonna go now, okay.
It can be confusing.
It's Valentine's Day today?
Hello?
No, it's a Monday. Valentine's Day always falls on a Thursday.
Who's your head? That's Thanksgiving.
And they can be complicated.
Alex and I were supposed to have sex today.
Love can't be planned.
It's not love she's talking about.
But at the end of the day, it's all about love.
So how do you guys feel about each other?
Oh my gosh, I totally love him.
And I'm crazy about her.
Sabian wrote his number on my hand.
There you have it, young love, full of promise, full of hope, ignorant of reality.
My father said to me, "You're ever with a woman that's too good for you, marry her." Happy Valentine's Day.
Wow.
She said yeah! No retreat, no surrender.
I think that was from a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Let's live it up.
Greatest love song of all time.
Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss.
That's a stripper song.
Go out and smash it. Like, oh my God.
Yes, have another bottle of wine.
Valentine's Day is about anger, disappointment, love,
Romance. Mating.
Discretion.
Sparkly.
Commitment.
I love it. I love hype.
That's nice.
So although I celebrate Valentine's Day, I would have to agree with Taylor Swift in the fact that there's a lot of hype around Valentine's Day. We have been conditioned to believe that if we are not in a romantic relationship on Valentine's Day, that we should be miserable and that maybe somehow we failed at love. We have also been conditioned to believe that our day should be filled with lots of chocolate, flowers, a decadent candlelight dinner, lots of intimacy, or else our day will be miserable and devoid of all possible pleasure and joy. Oh, and if we are in a relationship, well, God help our partners, because then we believe that they should be the absolute embodiment of Cupid, him or herself. And if they're not, they are doomed. And I had to chuckle when the reporter in the clip kind of brings us all down. And I think many of us are experienced here and have been following a spiritual path for a while. When the reporter shares, "Oh, young love, full of promise, full of hope, ignorant of reality." And I would actually add, not just ignorant of reality, but ignorant to the deeper and spiritual meaning of our power of love. And one of the aspects of our power of love is desire. And in the book Living Originally, Robert Brummett invites us into a ninth practice, which is living in the heart of desire. So before I go into the explanation of this practice, I would like to bring some clarity around the word desire. As I said just a minute ago, desire is an aspect of our power of love. And the power of love is located in the center, in our heart chakra. And that desire gets filtered through our different levels of consciousness, which I will speak about later. But ultimately, if we are in touch with the purest and deepest level of divine idea, we will harmonize and unify all of our spiritual powers from their highest state. You know, every Sunday we share a power, and it is shared that when we are centered in ego consciousness, like for love, it can be where we're either not in touch with our desires or our love or purpose, so to speak, or from the grandiose state of personality, it can be like where we're clinging and fatally attracted to something. And desire in the Buddhist tradition has a different meaning. It's synonymous with attachment or clinging. And attachment and clinging is the root of all suffering. So I want to bring us into the meaning that Robert Brummett is giving to this practice. And so he states that to live in the heart of desire means to experience desire fully without attachment to outcome. And it is to allow life to express through you, unfettered and unfiltered by past conditioning. And when we are able to do that, when we are not clinging, attached, or resistance to what is, which is the second practice, deep self-acceptance that we explored months ago, then we tap into the purity of the divine ideas of wanting to express fully from that place. And that is what it means to live originally. And so before we go into some of the steps of the practice, I wanted to share a little bit about living in the heart of non-attachment and what that means. And there's a video here that I will share with you, and it is narrated by a Buddhist teacher named Michael Stone.
The heart of a contemporary spiritual practice is being totally engaged with our lives. Forests, rivers, polluted cities don't care about your enlightenment. What they care about is your aliveness to present experience, your action in the world, and the effects of your actions. And one of the terms in spiritual practice that is so misleading is this idea of non-attachment. So many times people hear the word non-attachment and they think of kind of dissociation. I'm not going to be attached to how things are. Nothing moves me. And then you walk around like a zombie. And in a way, I came to spiritual practice at a time of really turbulent emotion in my life. And I really thought that practice, and meditation especially, would become a way to kind of, get out of feeling. But actually, things don't really work that way. And non-attachment doesn't mean just not being attached to your bicycle or your apartment or your bank account. Non-attachment means not clinging to fixed ideas, not clinging to the way you think things should be, but actually opening to the way things really are. So I would translate non-attachment as engagement. Non-attachment is a deep intimacy to see the way that everything leans into everything else, to wake up to the inherent interconnection of all things, but to do it in a way that's non-attached. So not to open up to the interconnectedness of things and say, oh, this is the interconnectedness of things, right there, you've lost it. But how do we become intimate with the way things are underneath language, underneath our concepts of how we think things should be? This is really the heart of non-attachment, is this kind of deep engagement. And it comes from this term yoga, which is a Sanskrit term, which comes from the root yuj, which means to unite. But taken out of the verbal form, yoga means union. And I like to translate the term yoga as intimacy, because it's not something you do. You don't do intimacy. In fact, intimacy is the byproduct of giving up fixed views of the way things are. Fixed and rigid ideas are really the enemy of intimacy. And it's really what shuts down relationship. And because we're living at a time where we don't need any more ideology and philosophy, what we really need is a way to let go and to drop in, to the truth of how things are, economically, emotionally, ecologically, socially. And that includes both what's beautiful and also what's devastating. It means opening up to the fact that this world is stunningly beautiful and also a total catastrophe. And how to hold both. How to hold both. How to open up to the joys of being alive and also to the suffering that's inherent in being in a body, and being in a body that's aging, and being in a world right now that really needs our help. So I think we need to reimagine this idea of non-attachment as a practice of not clinging to fixed ideas so that we can be engaged with the world. The world needs us, and our actions make a difference. So how to rethink spiritual practice, not as trying to transcend, not as being dissociated, not as witnessing our lives, but as being totally immersed in life.
So I think he gives one of the clearest and expanded view of living in the heart of non-attachment. And what I really appreciate is that he expands non-attachment to not just be to clinging to material possessions, but to kind of debunk some of the myths around non-attachment. And some of those are being disassociated, being devoid or distance from what we are feeling, what we are experiencing, or distancing ourselves from our thoughts. And when we do that, we can bypass our human experience. And I just love how he talked about how we could just experience the nature of something. In the book, The Untethered Soul, if you have read that or was part of the study group that we did at Unity, Michael Singer talks about experiencing something as is, experiencing its nature. Everything has a vibration. How do we take it in without the filter of all of our beliefs and clinging to how we think something should be, or seeing it through the projection of our old stories? And non-attachment is not about suppressing. I'm above this. I'm going to say all my affirmations. Again, that is a spiritual practice, but it's, again, not suppressing what is most alive within us, knowing that they can both be present as we breathe into the fullness of what we experience with every breath. And it is not living devoid of intimacy, for only when we can be truly present without our stories or wanting someone or something to be a certain way can we be in the flow, so to speak, present, connected, understanding, and being aware of the interconnectedness of all of life. And so to be And non-attachment then means living fully, as he said, living fully engaged and intimately alive in the flow of the interconnectedness of life. And when we can do that, we can live deeply within the desires of our spiritual heart. And in doing, in order to be centered, to be fully present to that, we must be radically aware of our personal agendas, the way we think people should behave or not behave, the way we think our life should unfold. Things are unfair when people die or pass away, or there are other things that we quote unquote call or bad or misfortunate things happen in our lives. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't experience the sadness, the disappointment that all come with those endings or chaos or conflict that we experience. But nevertheless, in this moment of deep self-acceptance, practice 2 of living originally, I do not resist what is. And in the fullness of knowing that everything is my teacher, let me breathe into what is. And it also brings us into the opposite, or the other polar of a resistance, is when we cling or don't want to let go of something, because that outside source is what makes us happy. And it's only when we have that outside source, or the way we think things should be, is only when we can experience full joy. And so there are many gifts of living in the heart of non-attachment. When we are no longer clinging or resistance, and we are fully present, breathing into all of our humanity and our divinity, and fully alive, and just living in the heart and allowing the flow of life to be what is. And as we do that, we allow the divinity, the wisdom from within to just rise. We don't have to analyze, make it happen. It just happens. And in that space is when we know true freedom. And in that space, we are in the experience, the nature of what is, the vibration of, Michael Singer talks about the nature of a snake, right? We have a whole story about snakes, that they're a symbol of evil, the symbol of the devil, they're dangerous. And no, I wouldn't be going next to maybe a poisonous snake, right? But then he also talks about being in the experience of feeling the vibration of the snake, noticing, just experiencing it from deep within, and just being present. Again, not that I'm going to hang out with one. I shared this in one of my classes, one of the Living Originally classes, that, I also equated this one day when I was going on one of my walks. I was passing this house that has these large chimes, and they were playing. The wind was blowing and the chimes were just sounding off. And oh my gosh, they were, the sound was beautiful, melodious. And then 2 seconds later, there was a truck that was digging up cement in the street across the way. And it was, and then all of a sudden it was like, I wanted to cling to the chimes because I thought they were beautiful, and I wanted to resist the sounds of the truck. And somehow, right, we can be conditioned by our outside world. Chimes make me feel good. Truck makes me feel bad. But in the state of non-attachment and living in the heart of desire, it doesn't matter what's going on around me, because the seat of my center, the seat of The joy, the wisdom is when I am connected right here and not needing to have the conditions to be one way or another. And when we are in the space or in the heart of non-attachment, it is only then can we discern our purest and deepest desires. And by purest, I mean, as they are discerned at their highest level before they get filtered through layers of our consciousness and of our stories, which is something we are going to explore. So before I go over the layers of discerning, the layers of consciousness, right? So in the book, Robert Brummett talks about, think of pure, clear water as that layer of being deeply connected to our most highest wisdom, our deepest desires. And again, that is to express from our highest, to use the gifts that we were given to serve. And that could be in takes many different shapes and many different forms. But what happens is, as it goes through the different levels of consciousness, let's say in our subconscious basement where we are holding on to our wounds, that water gets a little dirty, and we add a little bit more grit to that water when we take on conditioning of how people should love, how they should behave. And then, when we start living from our roles and making things happen and the world needing to be a certain way to make us happy, then that water, he uses that analogy, the water gets darker and more murky and murky. So what are some of the steps of practicing living in the heart of desire? So first, again, he always takes us back to the first couple of steps in the practice, right? The first couple of practices, everything is about radical self-awareness. Being aware of the desires that arise as they arise. And then breathing into them. As the desire arises, what's the nature of the desire? How do I feel? What emotions are active? What thoughts do I have about that? What do I sense in my body? What stories do I create? Or am I just fully present to what is? And then we just breathe into it. And then do we accept what is, or do we try to resist it? And then this is really important. As a desire arises, he asks that you refrain from acting on impulse. That is why breath is so important, to help us bypass or move past our subconscious, our amygdala with all of our stories and our woundedness. And when we breathe, we allow ourselves to become unified in the heart mind, so to speak. So refraining from acting on impulse. And then there is what Paul Hasselbeck, Unity minister and author of Power Up Your Life, he asks us to look at from what level of consciousness is our desire emanating from. And as we have that radical awareness, we are empowered to make that choice, not to act on impulse, not to act out of attachment or from clinging. And when we can discern and choose to live from the deepest state of our desire, then we are living on purpose. And so let's take a look at those 4 levels of consciousness as I spoke about that Reverend Paul Hasselbeck has in Power Up Your Life. So the first level is when we are completely unaware. We are just living on automatic pilot. We kind of abdicate our power of choice, which is the power of will. And whatever is running in the subconsciousness will be what will outpicture in our lives. And then we move into the state of awareness, of being conscious. But this consciousness is where we make choices from our senses. And this is not wrong or right. Again, we hold it all. There's beauty in being able to feel, to taste, to touch. I mean, many of us enjoy the aroma of coffee brewing in the morning, or freshly baked bread or pizza, so, it's being present to what is, but also knowing that desire can be triggered from one of our senses. So, when I am sometimes watching the Food Network and I am not hungry at all of a sudden I may have an urge for a big bowl of pasta or linguine and clam sauce because, I'm watching the food and I'm remembering what it smells like, usually with some of the Italian dishes. And then, like Pavlov's dog, like I have that desire. And again, we are blessed to enjoy all of our senses. Again, are we clinging to it as our only source of fulfillment and happy? And is that what we do? Do we use food and drink to stuff down things, or to let us escape, to disassociate, as Michael Stone talked about in the beginning? And these kinds of attachments, can lead to addiction. And we move from being conscious and coming from our personality or our ego. And when the power of the month is shared during every service, it talks about being underdeveloped, overdeveloped, and then when we are in spiritual consciousness, centered in the seat of harmonizing our power of love from its highest place. And so desire here is emanating from our conditioning, like I spoke of in the beginning, when, how we are conditioned, how Valentine's Day. Now, yes, I had to be reminded today to put on red. I had brown on, but I do like wearing red. I do like getting flowers. So again, then we ask ourselves, can I enjoy the day without wearing red or without, having roses? And I would say maybe in the beginning of my relationship, that wasn't so. But as we all evolve, we really come from that deeper understanding that, so again, when we're living out of our personality and our ego, which means our conditioning, we look out here for what makes us happy. And so those desires will all be about, I need to make more money. I need to get a better job. I need to be in a certain relationship, live in a certain house. It needs to be quiet in order for me to meditate, so on and so on. And again, this is not about bypassing or not being intimate with our human experience and our feelings. But again, is it only those things that can bring us to the seat of joy and the seat of who we are being? And do certain conditions need to be in place for me to be in touch with the truth of who I am? And then we move to, which is the core of living originally, is being conscious of loving for the sake of loving. And that aspect of desire is when we live from our authentic selves. And here we live from our divine nature, regardless of circumstances. Our desires are connected to, this might be an uncomfortable experience, but my desire is to be transformed by life, not to cling to things, not to resist things, but to be transformed by life. And our desires here are also not about my own personal transformation, but the transformation and the healing and the empowerment of others. And I have this desire to use my gifts in service to others. So I just want to give a few examples so you can see the difference. When our desire is emanating from personality versus, our desire emanating from our authentic self. And we could even see this as it arises. So I shared a little while ago a video from Michael Stone, who is when I found out after preparing for this talk, passed away. He had died like 3 years ago from a fatal accident. But one of the things I want to share was Michael Stone began studying Buddhism and became a yoga teacher and a Buddhist teacher after he was dealing with bipolar disorder, where he would have such manic periods and then depressive periods. And so instead of being a victim, instead of going off and, being angry at the world, so to speak, he decided that, no, I'm having these experiences of these highs and lows, and nevertheless, I am still tapped in so deeply to the core of who I am. And that core of who I am means not only do I want to transform my life, I do not want to push this away, but how does it take me into the deepest part of me to transform my life and then to go forth and to support others on the path. So he lives in that place of mastery and from the highest calling of his desire, opposed to closing that off, thinking that, if there wasn't a certain medication for him, unless he got cured, so on, that he could not live his highest calling. And it also brings us, there's another experience I'd like to share is, I don't know how many years ago now, but I was at the time a lay leader on the Unity Worldwide Ministry Board. And I remember being frightened out of my wits because there I was with, a lot of ministers. And I just thought, I don't know, I just had ministers on a pedestal, now being one. I no longer do that. I appreciate the service and the experience of growth. But we were at a session where we were asked to formulate what we think a new purpose statement for Unity Worldwide would be. And here I happened to be in a group with a few ministers who had these mega churches. Anyway, breathing deeply and, just being connected to my heart space, someone shared, oh, I think our purpose is to be the fastest growing and the biggest movement in the world. And, that sounds all exciting. And so I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, so what would we be doing if, is our purpose to be big and fast? Or is our purpose, like the master taught us, to transform our lives, to heal, to become the I am presence, and in doing so, heal and transform others? Is our spiritual teachings about being big and fast, or they are about awakening and living fully in our divine expression? And so after I shared that, there were a little bit of, there was experience of crickets in the room. And, I felt uncomfortable, but it was the truth that I knew was most alive within me and I was most connected to. And sometimes if we are connected to our ego, our service will be about titles, right? About the prestige, as we see happening all too often in our government, about money, instead of serving the people, serving from the highest place that we are called to do, knowing our oneness. So I invite you this week and the following weeks to get in touch. What are the desires of your heart? Notice the desires as they arise. Where are they emanating? And as you allow, again, when we look at where they're emanating, this is not about to punish us or to judge us, but to just notice. Because when we are fully aware and awake and in the fullness, it is only then that we can make an empowered choice. And in that empowered choice can be living from our highest calling. And so I'd like to close with the invitation. It was written by Uriah Mountain. So I invite you, if you feel so moved, to close your eyes and allow these words, because it speaks about allowing. It speaks about non-attachment. It speaks about living in the desires of our heart, our deepest desires. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for. And if you dare to dream of meaning and living your heart's longing, your heart's deepest desire. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for true love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, be realistic, remember the limitations of being human. I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not pretty every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver moon, yes. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustained you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments. Namaste and happy Valentine's Day. Thank you.